Okay, hi, I'm Angela, and this was my project for 641. This is my culture show and tell. I was born and raised in Macon, Middle Georgia, so that makes me a Southerner, and there's a lot of things I'm going to describe that kind of go along with not only just Southern values, but also specific to my hometown of Macon. We lived in the Bible Belt, and that's a term where religion plays a huge role, and there's like a church on just about every corner. So that's what my world was like as a child. In the summer we had vacation Bible school, and my mom taught and I would help, and I was probably maybe 12, 13 years old, and it just always made you feel pretty good that you could be a part of the church and help in that aspect. She made Dad, me, all of us, we would always have to go to church. We go to Sunday school in the morning and then church, and it didn't matter how tired you were, you went to church. That was just a thing every Sunday. When I moved from Macon to Atlanta, I went to Georgia Tech, and this was in the late 80s. Being in Metro Atlanta really allowed me to shape my perspective of religion and politics. So I ended up going to a private Baptist school from kindergarten through 12th grade, and you were really encapsulated in that world. Now you're still keeping up with news, watching TV and all that. We didn't have social media back then. This was the 80s. It really wasn't until I moved to Atlanta when I went to Georgia Tech that I got introduced to a different culture, ideology, less conservative, maybe more middle of the road, a little bit more to the left, but it was just a nice opportunity to be exposed to these different environments. Just know that my culture grew up very, very conservative, and you kind of stick with that a little bit. It's because it was everywhere, and part of that spirituality, my brother's the same way. You're spiritual, but maybe a little bit different than Mom and Dad in that aspect. But I don't base. Okay. My spirituality guides my decisions, but I think all of the different environments have allowed me to be better at critical thinking. You're open for debate, but you definitely taught you get facts. So that's kind of where I came from. My dad's military, and Mom and Dad are older, so they come from a different generation. They were born during the 40s, so they have a little bit of a different perspective, and I kind of think that's helped shape a little bit of my identity. And then we'll skip down to Dad's military. Okay, with my dad being in military, he was in National Guard. When I see camouflage, Southerners, camouflage a lot of times represents hunting, and not that my family were big hunters or anything, but you know, as a Southerner, you probably knew at least one hunter. But for me, camouflage represents more military. My dad was in the National Guard. He retired as a colonel. Very, very proud of him. Careers. Okay, I'm all over the place here. There was also, for careers, you went to high school, graduated, college, got married, got the career. That was kind of the thing and the way it was. But there was a little bit of a double standard. Okay, so one of the different things with college and careers is there were no stay-at-home dads. The guy would be considered lazy if he stayed at home. What? Which is a horrible thing, but that was just kind of the way the thought was. Guys would go to school, it might even still be around too, I don't know. Guys would go to school, get the job. Girls, you go to school, but I hated this phrase, you're getting a Mrs. degree. And for us that were at Georgia Tech, that's a very hard school, and it was really an insult to think that we were going there for a Mrs. degree, just to find a husband. No, we're there for a degree. Ask any woman, there's going to be sexism at some point. But I specifically remember back then, too, at Tech, I'm a freshman, and I walk into a mechanical engineering class, I sit down, this guy's in front of me. He turns around in his chair, and he looks at me and says, "Are you in the right class?" Slam. Total insult. I'm looking at him like, did this guy really just say that? And like I said, there were some other things too growing up that you would see, but that one really stuck out. Now I know with some of that, I've heard people say that it's an insult if a guy opens the door for you. Now that crosses into my Southern culture because that's not an insult. But for Southerners, there's manners, and I think like that with the guys opening a door for us, that's what we're used to. It's just manners. It's very respectful, and I like that. I appreciate that. Where's I at with this? Hold on. The the TV show Stranger Things, they did an excellent job capturing some of the flavor of what it was like back then, because you were more creative with some of the things that they've shown in the show, the projects they're doing. Of course, there was the arcade, do a lot more playing out, bicycles and getting out. Again, no social media, no internet. The mall, the Macon Mall was huge for us because that was one of the meeting places. And of course, there were other things to do too. Okay, so another part of my culture is my Southern accent. Big shocker, right? Okay, so as a Georgia peach, as we recall, that's one of the monikers given to a native Georgian. And as you can tell, I'm reading on my laptop here. Okay, so within the Southern culture, there's different dialects. I say a lot, right? So with the Southern culture, there's a lot of different dialects. If you go down to South Georgia, you're going to hear some real Southern accents. You go to different parts of the Southeast, rural areas. I'm not going to call out some states by name, but you go out to some rural areas, yeah. And then there's, like I said, different types of accents. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, and then of course I've got some pictures up here of some other famous Southerners that chose to lose some of their accents depending on, I guess, what they're doing. Okay, so Southern food. Why am I shaking my chair like that? I don't know. Okay, so Southern food. The Southeast, we've got our ways of doing barbecue, and nobody else can really do it. Just ask around. Southern barbecue, pulled pork. There's a few things that keep me from being a vegetarian. Another is New Way chili dogs. That stuff is awesome. It is so good. The older I get, it's like, I mean, I grew up a meat every meal, right? We had steak, potatoes, every meal there was some kind of a meat. Not quite that way anymore, but like I said, some of the Southern culture, the foods, fried foods, amazing. So growing up in Middle Georgia, we had our preferences for barbecue, grits, sweet tea, fried chicken. And like I said, New Way, incredible place. For Macon, New Way kind of brought some popularity to the town. Macon's got some attractions beside the Almond Brothers. Woohoo! Also, the Cherry Blossom Festival. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so Fresh Air Barbecue is another one that's pretty good. They started growing too, and they've entered contests. So Fresh Air, good stuff. Sweet tea, as long as it's sweet. You can't sweeten it after. It has to be made with the sugar in it. And then again, of course, there's Southerners have special. We have different ways of doing collards. I don't like sweet. Ugh. But yeah, there's some good old grits, collards, like I said, fried chicken, fried catfish, peaches, and moon pies. Delicious. Moon pies go way back. Yeah, Grandma and Pop, they were always talking about moon pies, and it's delicious. So good. And it seems like that's kind of identified with the South, too. I don't know what I'm saying. Okay, another Southern thing is cotillion. Manners, oh my God. Mom was killing me with this. Okay, we had to learn, not so much my brother, again, that sexist thing. We had a whole thing. I had to go to a cotillion and etiquette class and all this stuff. And you've got your plates and where the forks and spoons and how to use them. And nice to know, good information, but like, really, Mom? I guess if we had the internet, we could have done some online Zoom stuff for that instead of having to actually go to all that mess. Anyway, then there was the dancing. Now, I do appreciate it. Like I said, back then I didn't really, I'm 13 years old, right? But yeah, I mean, it was really interesting learning how to dance, learning how to ballroom dance. Even the foxtrot, right? But it still was cool, all that stuff. And I remember growing up, and as I'm getting older, and of course that you're starting to see that change. That's the thing about as you get older, you start seeing and comparing how trends change. And of course, I prefer to be more laid back. I mean, I'm in a t-shirt, so that's kind of my thing too. But of course, because of that in my culture, you still have that the inner drive to still keep up. You don't just roll out of bed and go to class looking like you just woke up. Again, you're not dressing for the Academy Awards. You're looking somewhere between just woke up and Academy Awards, right? Part of our Southern manners that Mom was really big into. A lot of what North Macon did, all of Macon celebrates Cherry Blossom Festival, but North Macon had the cherry blossom trees that were donated, and a lot of the subdivisions would have them along the streets, and the way the cherry blossoms bloom, it almost looks like they would lean over the street, and especially during March, they only bloom for a short time frame. It would almost look like they were snowing when the wind would blow, and the little petals would fall along the street. So the tour buses would come through, and I didn't realize that Mom and Dad's house was, the house I grew up in, was on this tour. And you're outside going to the mailbox, and you see these buses and people with cameras flashing as they're taking pictures of everything. But if you just Google it, you'll see that Macon Cherry Blossom Festival has been going on for decades, and it's got a lot of attention. There's a lot of good foods and cultures and shows and things going on. So that was just, like I said, part of my identity is that Cherry Blossom Festival too. And then of course some other events that kind of represent the South is, NASCAR and monster trucks. It doesn't do it justice to watch on TV. You really got to go, and it was crazy, especially being in the infield, and you could just feel the power of these vehicles as they're going around the track. I would have never thought it would have been like that. Okay, one other thing beside the accent is you are saying yes ma'am, yes sir, and you say yes ma'am and yes sir. Do not be offended, because the first time somebody said yes ma'am to me, I'm thinking, I'm not that much older than you. At this time, I'm in my early 20s at the time. But you say yes ma'am and yes sir. The way you're taught, if they're a minute older than you, I think you just say yes ma'am, whatever. You just always say yes ma'am and yes sir. But again, with no internet, none of that stuff. I had the camcorder. I was always doing videos as a kid, and I was freelance video for a while. But I think also part of our culture was we would go outside. We were in the South, so it was a lot warmer. So we would spend a lot of time outdoors. Riding bicycles out at the dead end, and just being creative. Just make up stuff as kids, because you're outside playing with bikes, and the family would get together. And like I said, there's moments like that I really miss of my childhood. And like I said, it was also a time thing too, because it was the South, but it was also the 70s and 80s growing up. So it was a different time, and you did really get to connect with people. But there's also some beauty with having the internet and keeping up with social media and keeping up with friends and family. A lot of different experiences. And even now, I've gone back and visited my high school, and it's still got some flavor of some of the southern ways too. Okay.
No, I am your father.
Okay, I probably get way more than 15 minutes here. Yikes.